Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Board of Education School Board meeting for October. It is 7 p.m. We call the roll.
Mrs. Barker?
Here.
Mr. Bryant?
Here.
Mrs. Fairbrief?
Here.
Mrs. McKay?
Here.
Mr. McNally?
Here.
Ms. Weigel?
Here.
Mr. Hammond?
Here. Thank you. Will you all please rise for the pledge?
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. Let's get to our citizens' comments. Before we have Mrs. Barker read, I just wanted to make a comment. Since last month, a lot of people asked the board to respond while they were talking, and it's not board policy, so I just kind of want to reiterate that tonight, that we don't answer anything, but if there's things that can be answered, someone from the administration will reach out to you. That's why we ask for phone numbers and emails and things, so that we can respond to you if we have those answers, and that to just please be respectful of the board and staff, and as a reminder, please wear your masks and everything while you're speaking, as we all do while we're in school. Ms. Barker?
The school code provides for a public comment period at each board meeting. Subject to reasonable constraints, the practice of this board is to limit public comment to 3 minutes per speaker to a total of 30 minutes per meeting. Speakers addressing the board are expected to maintain a reasonable level of civility. Also, personnel matters are sensitive and confidential. Comments regarding individuals should be respectful. Insults and defamatory remarks have no place in this setting. The board will terminate public comment if speakers cannot adhere to these guidelines. Please identify yourself at the beginning of your remarks.
Thank you, Ms. Barker. Our first speaker is Kimber Mchugh.
Good evening. My name is Kimber Mchugh. I have a sophomore and junior at East. I have spoken at the past 2 meetings to advocate for my kids to be back in school in a classroom setting as normal as possible. I'm standing before you once again because I am concerned with the choices we were given. Options to either continue with virtual learning or send our kids to school for 2 half-days while the teacher is not just responsible for teaching in-person students, but also virtual and remote students too. I know, Dr. Pearson, you think this option is innovative, but I would say that just because you throw $600,000 of technology, which by the way isn't even installed yet, into a classroom does not mean your decision is innovative. In fact, I would say making teachers teach into in-person students while at the same time teaching virtual and remote students is ridiculous. What's more ridiculous is to make my son sit in a classroom while their teacher is at home teaching them via a computer, while taxpayers pay a TA essentially to babysit them. I would like to share with you part of an email I received from one of my son's teachers. She sent this to all parents in her classroom. As a side note, my kid did have his work turned in. In the letter, she asked parents to please check their child's PAC account because several of them had missing work. She said she could not control her students' actions from behind a computer screen. She said, and I quote, "I basically feel powerless." How are teachers going to feel any differently when having to make sure they are focused on the students in front of them while also not forgetting about the remote and virtual students? Tell me how powerless teachers will feel then. What will happen when there is an IT issue and they can't get their virtual and remote kids going? Will my kid just have to sit in the classroom and wait while teachers quickly have to figure out something for them to do? How in control will our teachers feel then? I am concerned that because our district is investing about $1 million into this innovative option of 2 half-days of learning, that this is going to be as good as it gets. Why else would the district agree to spend so much money? Why wouldn't we have just done a traditional hybrid plan and not spend $1 million on technology and hiring TAs? It does not make sense. My son's teacher feels powerless, but I want to assure her and other teachers that I will continue to advocate for in-person learning where you are only responsible for in-person students. I will continue to let our taxpayers know Dr. Pearson's innovative plan that cost us $1 million, but only gets our kids back in school for 2 half-days. I will let people know that this innovative plan forces our teachers to be teaching 3 separate classes at one time. I will continue to do whatever I can in my power to get our kids back into the classroom where their teachers are only teaching, engaging, and focused on their in-person students. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe the next 2 are together. This is Debbie and Emily Leonard.
Hi, my name is Emily Leonard, and I am a recent 2020 graduate from St. Charles East. And when this pandemic took our world and turned it upside down, I was in my senior year. And first rumors were flying around the school so fast. And is this really as bad as they're gonna make it seem? What even is COVID-19? Is this the zombie apocalypse? Is this really gonna reach us in St. Charles? Then the teachers started talking about grabbing our books at the end of the day because we just might take a few days off, but it won't be any longer than 2 weeks. I had an unscheduled 8th as I sat in the business law classroom, listening to timid underclassmen address the faux jury for the first time when the announcement went over the intercom, and in a blink of an eye, the best year of my life was ripped out of my hands. Online learning was a new norm as I sat in last night's t-shirt and rolled over in bed to attend American Agenda honors. While I'm not blaming anyone for this pandemic, I am, however, blaming you for your response to this pandemic. As a senior, I did miss out on a plethora of events. I never got to walk the hallway one last time. I never got to dance the night away at prom. I never got to hug my teachers goodbye, and I never got to walk across the stage. I was heartbroken, as I know thousands, if not millions of people felt, but it still hurt nonetheless. I was given a few minutes to grab my things and walk out of the building I had called home for 3.5 years. I had my cap and gown thrown into my trunk. I was told not to go anywhere else on campus to take photos. But guess what? I jumped that fence at the football field, as did many of my classmates, and I took proper graduation photos. And I do not regret it. Later, I sat on my front porch and I cried while I watched countless monotone names crawl across my screen, knowing that this was all I was going to receive from my school. Months went by and I hit a drive-thru to not grab a milkshake and fries, but to grab my diploma. And I grew more hateful as I watched stories on social media of my friends of the various places I used to live get actual graduations. They were not normal in any way, shape, or form, but there were people willing to celebrate the graduates. Socially distant graduations, drive-through graduations, only one person goes to an auditorium at a time, graduations outside with chairs placed 6 feet apart, and graduations with only students will broadcast it to the families in other areas, hundreds of different ideas. Yet I got the lights on the football field to celebrate my 12 years of hard work. I was accepted into a university with a presidential scholarship, and they gave me more warmth it felt than you did. And I loved my time at St. Charles East, and for it to come to such an abrupt end was devastating. But the only hope I had was from a group of Facebook moms. My mother included. Moms of seniors were begging on their hands and knees for something. They even took it upon themselves to hold a mini parade, which I ended up watching from my driveway. I just expected a little something more from a school that is as amazing as St. Charles East. Not once did I actually feel like it was a great day to be a saint. I was bitter towards a school that I had given so much, and it felt like I'd received nothing in return. It was as if no effort was made. I have expressed these feelings to some of my past teachers, to senior classmates, and to my family. I considered talking to Principal Richter. However, I realized that this really isn't his fault either. I needed to go straight to the source. Now, not only is this a rant, but this is really a plea. With COVID-19 still showing its ugly face across our country, this virus is not going anywhere anytime soon. Therefore, I'm crying out to you so that you do not treat the class of 2021 the way that you treated the class of 2020. If things end up the way that they did for us, do not drop these year's seniors as if they are the plague rats. Please give them, as well as the other classes, the attention that they do deserve. High school is not easy, and high school through a global pandemic is absolutely horrifying, so don't make it worse. I wouldn't wish this kind of loneliness upon my worst enemy, so I definitely don't think that you would wish this kind of treatment upon the children that keep your institution alive and breathing. And as I bring this speech to a close, I hope I've shined a light on how your decisions have affected others, how your failure to act has broken hundreds of hearts. I have taken matters into my own hands, not through a passive-aggressive Facebook post, and not through shouting at an empty building, and not through leaving angry voicemails on some machine. I care about people, and I care about what is fair. I've been told to stand up for what I believe in, so here I am. I am on my feet to make sure that another group of students are not forgotten.
Thank you. The next speaker is Josh Westerfield.
Hello, my name is Josh Westerfield. I'm a freshman at St. Charles North. I wish I didn't have to be here tonight, but as a member of this community, I don't feel like my voice has been heard or is being ignored. The school board is elected by members of this community to be our voice to the school administrators and the teachers union. While COVID-19 has presented a lot of challenges to our society as a whole, I've tried hard to be understanding to the rules and ideas to try and slow the spread. Over 6 months later, I believe we know a lot more about this virus than we did before. And our school closures no longer make sense. Based on a peer-reviewed article titled Global Perspective of COVID-19 Epidemiology for a Full Cycle Pandemic in the European Journal of Clinical Investigation, the global infection fatality rate is 0.15 to 0.20%. For those under 70 years of age, it's 0.03 to 0.04. 99.8% of all people survive this virus. 99.96% of those under 70 survive this virus. The human emotion when faced with the unknown chooses to either fight or flight. With COVID-19, we chose as a nation to try to run and hide from this virus. 6 months later, we are still trying to hide from this virus, which at some point will affect all of us. I'm asking you, the board, Dr. Pearson, and the teachers union, to stand up and fight for our kids. We entrusted you by electing you to your positions to represent our community and our kids. We hired you to run our schools and select the best teachers for our students. We paid your salaries to show up and give it your best every day for our kids. More than not, fear keeps us from being our best or doing the right thing. I tell my kids often, and I have 4 of them, okay, that fear stands for false evidence appearing real. You have to face it head on, all right? So I'm asking you guys, and I'm not saying this virus isn't real, it's a real virus, okay? But I'm asking that we quit running from it. We confront it, we outsmart it, and eventually beat it. Our kids are the collateral damage due to our own fear, all right? Teen suicide attempts are up 40 to 100% this year alone. Overdoses going in the same direction. How many suicides or drug overdoses do you want on your hands this school season? My 2 oldest are grade students, and they have continued to do well with e-learning so far. But I've noticed they're not as energetic as they were in full-time school. All right? I've asked them how they feel about remote learning, and they say they miss seeing their friends and their teachers. Okay? They hate being in front of a computer screen all day. They wish they had the opportunity to go and ask for help on a problem or an assignment that can't be easily done over the computer. They miss being a part of something that's bigger than themselves. I'm asking you to come up with a plan as soon as possible to get our kids back in school full time and be the example we have elected or hired you to be. Thank you.
Thank you. Danielle Penman.
Hello, I'm Danielle Penman. I'm a proud mom to a senior at East High School and a 5th grader in elementary school. And tonight I'd like to share a letter. Our Senator Overweiss would have liked to have been here himself tonight, but unfortunately he had another commitment, so he asked me to read a letter on his behalf to the board, so I will start out with that. Dear Dr. Pearson and the St. Charles Community School Board, 303, I would like to take this opportunity to support the reopening of the schools in the St. Charles Community School District 303. It is imperative that our children return to in-school learning, which will help their mental state of mind, as well as get them back to a school curriculum and routine. I support this effort as long as the district reopening meets all safety guidelines laid out by the IDPH and the Illinois School Board Association. There are other school districts in this area that have reopened where students have a reduced schedule of in-school learning and are required to do some additional time at home learning online. There are also virtual learning tools for those parents who decide to not send their children back to school at this time. I realize that this may put a strain on resources and planning, but I do support children returning to in-person learning with safety guidelines in place. I believe in-person learning is not only more effective in educating our children, but will lessen the mental health strain put on our kids and the increased probability of suicide. We need to act sooner than later. Sincerely, Jim Oberweis. I'm very fortunate that I had an opportunity to talk to another elected official. I've been talking to our school board elected officials for 3.5 years now, and our administrators. And although I'm thankful that my son will get 2 half days of school in high school for his senior year, I still don't feel that's enough. I feel that there's a lot of hurting children, there's a lot of hurting families in our district that need more. There are educational gaps that are not being met. There are social, emotional, and mental issues that are not being addressed and met. Our children need support that can't come from home. They rely on their teachers, their counselors, their educational coaches, you guys, their deans, their peers. They're missing all that. They're missing memories and opportunity. I got a text from a family member of a son in the community who tried to kill himself last week. There's problems happening here. I'm in healthcare. I understand that there are concerns about this virus, but we're doing it safely. Our elementary and middle schools are less than 1% of students and faculty have this virus. I go to work every day. I take care of patients. I put a mask on, just like the teachers do, and will do, like you're doing. I'm not getting sick. My coworkers aren't getting sick. Healthcare workers around the country aren't getting sick. Guess what? We can't be 6 feet apart from our patients. We can't. We can't be 6 feet apart from our coworkers sometimes. But we're staying safe. We need to move forward. 2 half days is a start, but it should not be the end of moving forward with our students getting back into school full time. It's possible and it should happen, Dr. Pearson. And this community is relying on you to get that done. Thank you.
All right, thank you. That concludes citizen comments for the time. That takes us to item 3, which is our superintendent's report.
Great, thank you, Mr. Manheim. I just have a few announcements that I'd like to make this evening. We did receive word from the federal government on Friday that the summer meal program has been extended through the end of the school year, actually all the way till June the 30th. So we'll be expanding our food service program for members of our community through the end of the school year, and that will allow anyone in our district to receive a free meal every day. One of the things that is happening is the remote pickup is actually going to make it available for you to come and pick up once a week, so you can get the week's worth of meals in one pickup, if that's more convenient. So that information is going to be going out to families about adding that additional option so that you can pick up that way. But again, anyone in the district, you don't have to qualify for free and reduced lunch under the old guidelines to participate in this program. So we certainly would encourage you to take advantage of that if that's something that you're interested in. I also just wanted to mention that on October the 22nd at 6 p.m., I know Ms. McCabe or Ms. Barker might speak to this as well. We are going to have our Citizens Advisory Committee meeting. It is an open meeting, and it will be kind of the kickoff for the community focus groups related to our facility master plan. So if you know of other people that are interested in the facility master plan process or might possibly be interested in being on one of the community focus groups, they are welcome to watch that meeting. It will be virtual, as well as reach out to Carol Smith directly if they'd like to be considered as a member of one of the focus group teams. We'll be looking to add a few more members to our focus groups, as well as we'll be looking for a couple of staff members to serve on those also. So, but that first meeting on the 22nd is the kickoff, and all the information about that process will be shared at that point, and you'll have the opportunity to view that virtually on the district website. I also wanted to mention that school board election packets are available. We do have 4 seats open on the board, and for that election, that's April the 6th. We've put a link to the Kane County Clerk's office or on our website. So if you know people that are interested in that process, they can click on the link and go to the county clerk's office to get that information. I also wanted to mention, because it is coming up on a regular basis, but we also have this programming every year as part of our community outreach. Our Parent University program on the 29th of October is actually Dr. John Duffy. Dr. Duffy is a nationally recognized expert on parenting, whose most recent book, Parenting the New Teen in the Age of Anxiety, is the basis for our Parent University. We already have over 124 parents that have signed up to attend that. Those that registered early actually will get a copy of the book as well. We put a copy at your place tonight, board members, so you can have that. However, if you didn't sign up, you are certainly welcome to attend and participate in that. You would just need to secure your own book if you want the book, but you don't have to read the book to participate in the program. It's again on October the 29th. It will also be a virtual session. It begins at 6 p.m. and should be over by 7:30. We do need you to register online on the district website. It's on the front page. If you want to attend, just to make sure that we have your registration information so you can get the link to the session. So that's the Parent University program. And that concludes my update.
All right, thank you, Dr. Thurston. All right, so that takes us to our committee reports. Mr. McNally.
Okay, I should probably turn that on, huh? Sorry. The Learning and Teaching Committee met on September 21st. We started, as we are starting all meetings these days, with superintendent report. Very quickly in that report, he indicated graduation fees were refunded, and there are no current plans for making changes to graduation at this time. District 303 is proceeding with communications audit with the services of the Center for Effective School Operations, and we should have a report in December. Our items for discussion were, first item was enrollment and future projections, and the kind of the guiding commitments that we had for that discussion were health and safety of students and staff, in-person learning, sorry, the mask keeps slipping here, in-person learning for students, and a model, retaining full course offerings and retaining as much synchronous instruction time as possible. Model of instruction includes in-person, synchronous, and on remote days, and remote-only students, which of course requires a lot of planning for us to go through, or for them to go through. Actually, I don't do the heavy lifting there. Students will have 4 classes per day at 70 minutes each. Teacher is engaging with 3 different groups simultaneously. Students will, in the in-person classes, will end prior to lunch and will be able to do a grab-and-go lunch, which will be provided at the end of the day. The orientation is going to be October 15th and 16th, so it's coming up. First week, we'll have 50% students back on campus. Questionnaire for remote or in-person was distributed, and classroom technology will be added to accommodate sophisticated model instruction, which includes OWL devices, which track the movement throughout the classroom, and whiteboard cameras to display documents more closely to try to, as best as possible, mimic what occurs in the classroom. The items for discussion included turnaround time for technology and challenges prior to the arrival and setup, delivery of content, mode of instruction, and instructional sacrifices, timing of remote planning days, social emotional health, well-being of students, grab-and-go lunches transitioning throughout the building, current technology issues with Zoom, Google Meet, and connectivity. Consideration may be given to a different structure for high school remote-only students in the second semester if there are enough remote students for some classes. Parents supporting classrooms and non-teaching high school personnel assisting in elementary buildings, and the flexibility for changing between modalities as needed, maintaining as much consistency as possible. That was a very long discussion, so we had a bit of a recess, and after that recess, we had enrollment future projections from Mrs. Geyer, Mr. Moore, and Mr. Chizar, presenting the 2021 enrollment and projections, including information on class sizes and adjustments to accommodate social distancing for in-person learning. Discussion highlights from that included teacher concerns regarding differences in classes from in-person to remote, including size, in-person protocols, and technology with remote students. Retired Principal Mrs. Lichty will be returning to the district to oversee elementary remote classrooms and will address a variety of concerns, including communication. That was a much shorter discussion. Our next meeting will occur on, I believe it is the 16th. Do I have that date correct? I hope I do. And the potential agenda items for that will be the seal of biliteracy, transition center update on English language, and high school course offering book, actually. And that concludes that report.
All right, thank you, Mr. McNally. Take us to business services.
Good evening, everyone. We, as well, we had our Business Services Committee meeting on September 28th. Outside of citizen comments, we began with the superintendent updates, where Dr. Pearson provided the committee with new information relative to our high school return to learn plan, technology purchases, our staff parent student survey, and then professional learning. Really all was encompassed to the high school return to learn plan that will be initiated at the end of this week. From an items for discussion standpoint, we reviewed the Mid-Valley August financial statement, in addition to the District 303 August financial statement and report as well. We also reviewed the June 30th near final financial report for the fiscal year. Dr. Chapman provided a continuing update on the COVID-19 impacts from a financial standpoint. And then we moved into food service program update, where we reviewed the food service programs at the elementary and at the high school level, which then transitioned into an amended K-8 food management service contract with Organic Life, and that is on for action this evening. We also received an overview of the cash controls committee recommendation. This was the result of a previous audit that we had. And so we were able to understand all of the cash control improvements that the district team has put in place, and these controls will be communicated throughout the district and then monitored, of course, and adjusted as necessary. We discussed policy 4.30 revenue and investments. That is also, I thought it was on for action tonight, but I do not see that. My apologies. We reviewed that as well. And then designation of depositories is on the list for action. Policy 4.6 is purchases and contracts. That one in particular is on for action. And just to circle back, the policy 4.30 revenue and investments, that's in the for information, or under the consent agenda for tonight. We also have a resolution authorizing accounting transfer to the Capital Projects Fund, which will be on for action this evening. And then we discussed several renewals. Video renewal, support contract renewal for financial and human resource systems software. We also received an update on PTAB related to items that are currently still in the appeal process. We discussed the Athletic Boosters Club, turf field annual payment deferral, that is on for action this evening. And then we had a discussion centered around high school fees, which is also on for action. And with that, our next meeting, which should be the week following learning and teaching.
Great, thank you. Mr. Bryant, policy?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Manheim. So the policy committee met on September 21st. We did not have any citizen comments. And there were a few policies that as Ms. Fairbury just mentioned, we pushed off to business services to have a better discussion, probably a more appropriate setting. So again, I think there were 3 policies that were discussed at business services. But on the 21st, what was discussed was Mr. Moore brought to us a few changes to the press manual. The first item was 104, press manual 104, and there were minor changes, either language cleanup or some legal reference changes to numerous policies, 740, non-public schools, non-public school students, including parochial and home school students, policy 220, school board meeting procedure, policy 7190, student behavior, policy 7345, use of educational technology, student data privacy and security, and policy 4180, pandemic preparedness. That will be on for the consent agenda this evening. And then also press manual 105 was discussed. There were about 10 different policies that there were changes to that we looked at. Many changes were to make sure that we're in compliance with Title IX, changes to statute for Title IX. I won't list all of them, they are in your board packet, but that is also in for consent tonight. And then we will be meeting again November 16th, I believe, at 5 o'clock.
Excellent, thank you, Mr. Bryant. CAC.
Good evening. The CAC exec team met last week on October 6th. It was a virtual meeting. We had 2 citizen comments. The purpose of the meeting was to provide our exec team overview of the process for the facilities long-range planning. I'm sorry, I forgot the last name of Dan, but he was there and walked through the process with us. During that conversation, there were lots of questions about the timelines and who would be involved in the focus groups. The exec team felt that in order to really be able to reach out to more of the community, that there should probably be at least a report out to the community at different points in the process. We talked about having a town hall, it doesn't have to be a town hall, but some presentation at the end of the first part in January, and then again in March. As we talked about it, the timelines are pretty tight and pretty aggressive, which we'll talk about here in a second. We also talked about the need for teachers and people who actually work in the building to be part of the focus groups in order to be sure that we're hearing from as many voices as possible. Our meeting for the full group is, as Dr. Pearson said, is October 22nd. After this meeting, Mrs. Barker and I have had a chance to talk about the charge that Wold gave us, a draft, and we have put together a draft charge that we would like the board to look at and discuss later, but before the full CAC, so that we're more clear on what we want to have happen. And I think, and Mrs. Barker can jump in at any time, we both would like to revisit the timeline in order to do this well, we think we should be sure that we're taking our time to get a really good in-depth discussion. Particularly because we don't have a need to be finished by a certain date. We're not moving towards a referendum. We're not in a hurry to do something to a particular building. So we would like to have a further discussion. Mrs. Barker, do you want to?
Sure. Like Mrs. McCabe said, we, after that meeting, felt that it was important to at least put something together that had the priorities that we previously discussed and put the board stamp on the charge. We would like the board to review it before the 22nd, which lends itself to the L&T meeting that's coming up on the 19th. So if that works for L&T, then that would be the best place to put it. Unfortunately, business services takes place after that kickoff meeting on the 22nd. As far as the timeline discussion, that I think we can have that discussion at that time too. Something else that was said during that meeting by the exec is that they're excited to get started. So we may want to just be flexible with the timeline, and that may be part of the discussion, and let us know what they're needing as far as time constraints once they get started.
Is that, would the board be willing to look at the draft that we put together and then have a further discussion at L&T, which is October 19th, I believe, correct?
That's what I had. That's what I had on a calendar, but Mr. McNally, did you have something else?
No, I'm mistaken.
Okay, all right.
I was mistaken on the date.
So yes, the 19th.
I definitely am in agreement and supportive of that. Would we expect the draft in the learning and teaching packet, or will we be able to at least get it ahead of time in another fashion?
Dr. Pearson, you can send it out to board members?
Yeah, just to jump in, I also support that idea. I want to just clarify, the draft we're talking about is some of the priorities we talked about at our board retreat, where we talked about the use of different buildings, different programs, and specified all the different options we spoke about. Is that the list you'll be building?
Yes, so those are all captured in the statement. Additionally, part of what the architect created is kind of wrapped in there with some extra language that was captured from what the board members were saying, so that we can kind of formulate, what we like and we want to keep, or what we feel like does need to be added.
So if we want to re-synopsize any of our thoughts that came from that meeting, should we send that to you, just to?
I think we should do it all at the board table.
Okay, so I have a list.
I'm not the chair of L&T, so
Should we wait till L&T to talk about it, or do you want it ahead of time? I guess.
Well, I think, Dr. Pearson, you're gonna send it out. I think if there's something you should, I think we can just bring it to the committee meeting, and we can talk openly about, what our notes are and thoughts are.
I guess I'm wondering what's it gonna be formed from? Our discussion from the board meeting, or is it gonna be formed from Wold's impressions?
No, it was from our discussion.
Okay, so someone's taking those notes.
We use their language as a foundation, but you'll see that it's expanded and more keyed into what we talked about. But it may not reach everybody's desires, so we need to have a conversation.
Okay, that's what I'm just wondering. So at the board retreat, we talked about different programs like Northeast Academy and preschool, and what do we want to do with those things? And we talked about primary and secondary, just as an example across the district, as examples of like 5 to 10 year plan. And so those sorts of things would be included, and then different facilities like Haynes and some of the elementary buildings.
It's probably not as specific as what you're talking about right now, but it encompasses those areas for conversation, to be sure that the CAC understands to look further than what Gold's charge was.
Okay,
So if we can talk about it at L&T, we're not saying this is a done deal, we just felt we needed to put something.
that's what I was
out.
wondering, what kind of language, so it's
I
more.
think the idea was that Wold was gonna provide us with essentially a scaffold that we were gonna build on, and I think that it's best that we have that discussion as much as possible in front of the people who are gonna be affected by it, so. And certainly, we can't get into a lot of specifics now because we don't have them. So, and I think that's where we're gonna probably start to kind of put those things in, put some of those puzzle pieces into place.
So at L&T, our board is gonna discuss a bigger picture with Wold present, or we're bringing Dan back, or?
I don't know that we've invited him to that meeting, but it is a public meeting, so he certainly would be able to watch it.
So we actually aren't including Wold into that, so it's still just the board talking about what we want to see and the vision we have.
I think that it's probably important for us as a board to give some direction to them as well. So I don't know that it's necessary that they're there for that meeting, but I think with business services, we're planning on having them more integrated in the coming months. So I think if we have that discussion at L&T, and then CAC can further refine that, then we can, bring Wold back in and be like, hey, this is what the board's kind of honed in on. Like Mr. McNally said, here's scaffolding, and here's what we built on there.
I'm just trying to clarify the process, I'm not.
And I think that in that light, I think that's what Wold was actually, I kind of got the impression that's what he was looking for from us, is he kind of was saying, here's some stuff, and I need you to fill in a bunch of blanks for me before I can go any farther, so I think that that's the perfect time to do it.
Well, I don't disagree we have to do that, that's literally our job, but I'm just trying to figure out what the process is. So we're gonna do that, then we're gonna bring it to business services, or he's gonna go out to CAC, and then bring it back to us, I know, in January, but in the interim, you're just saying he's gonna bring it to business services in between there.
No, I didn't say he was gonna bring it to it, I just said that I didn't think that he would need to be part of that conversation next Monday. I think that that should be the conversation between the board.
And I think, Mr. Mannheim, what you were referring to, like historically, we have had them as an agenda item, and the facility plan more specifically as an agenda item, business services. So that's what I'm interpreting,
Correct.
what you're saying.
Correct.
Right. I heard Mr. McNally say that we should talk to the experts, so that would be Wold, but that's not what you're referring to next week.
No, next week, I think it's our board of 7.
Right,
Should have our
okay.
discussion so that we can
Just
give
clarifying.
some direction to CAC. And then we can loop Dan and his team back into it. Once because at the end of the day, it's us, like you said, it falls on us to, refine that and give direction to the community as well. So I think that's when we can bring back in.
If I can clarify, I was not saying we need to talk to the experts, I was saying the experts are looking to hear what we have to say before they can continue on with carrying out their charge. I do want to clarify one thing. I made an error. Our meeting is the 16th, I think I said the 19th, I'm sorry, the 19th, and I think I said the 16th, and what I was doing was looking a month ahead. So I apologize. It is next Monday, so my apologies. The meeting is the 16th.
Okay, so since this is still our committee report, we don't get too far into the weeds. Everyone's good with talking about this further next month?
Yes.
All right, good, excellent. Ms. McKay, was there anything else for CAC? Did you want to talk about DPTO?
Yeah, I attended the DPTO meeting, which was in September 16th. It was a virtual meeting. There were quite a few people on. There was a lot of discussion, really good discussion as they were unpacking what it is like to support a school that is both in person and remote. Clearly, all of the PTOs want to include the remote children in their activities and make them feel that they are part of the school, even though they are not in the school building. So every PTO was looking to how to include families who were not in person. So they were looking at virtual family events as well, so that they could bring families together. They also shared a lot about how they're supporting families in need, and how it is important to keep in mind that not everyone is able to get through the pandemic as easily as others. Mrs. Smith was also in part of it, and President Mannheim joined as well and talked about some things, so it was a really good discussion, and I hope sometime maybe you can sit in on. When it's virtual, it makes it a little easier to sit in than having to drive through. That's it.
All right, thank you. That's all for committee reports then, unless I missed
Not quite.
Nope. Whatever you-
We had the rare actual meeting of the Housing.
Oh, okay, yes, let's hear it.
Housing Commission. And unfortunately, that rare actual meeting happened to coincide with this school board special meeting, so I just asked for an update from them. So they provided them, this just comes from Helen Johnson from the Housing Committee. Updates were provided on the purchase and rehab sale of projects that were partially funded by the city. On Dean Street, a project was completed, house sold for $200,000. The income eligible buyer, which was a household income of 80% area median or below. There's a project on Adams Street. The project is under construction, will be completed in the next couple months, be sold to an income eligible buyer. The commission provided, approved funding from the Housing Trust Fund in the amount of $52,124 towards new construction of an affordable single-family home on the city-owned lot on Moore Avenue near the intersection of Moore and Riverside. The commission also recommended the city council transfer the lot to the developers, Deland and Sons. The commission discussed ways to promote the home rehab loan program. That reporting. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right. That concludes committee reports. So that takes us to our 4 action items. Do I have a motion to approve amended contract for K through 8 food management service contract with Organic Life for the fiscal year 2020 to 2021?
Second?
Mrs. White?
Oh, that's so moved, and then.
Ms. Fairgrave. Any discussion pertaining to this? As Ms. Fairgrave mentioned, we discussed this with business services.
I do have a comment just about, we've talked about the contract at length, and I think I'm comfortable with the financial portion of it. I would just like to, again, reiterate my concern for the hours of disbursement of the lunches to our district. I know we're going to review this in November. I'm still concerned that's a ways away for some of our families, because November business services is kind of down the ways a bit. I still would like us, I appreciate that we're gonna have each an opportunity for the pickup to pick up all week. I would still like us to see expanding that time a bit. I know we run into hourly wages, so we have to balance that, but I just think it's a very tight window for food pickup, especially for the 9 to 12. For our families that have food insecurity, or even families that just need additional help during this difficult time. So I would really encourage administration to look at expanding those windows for the high school pickup. If they want to get a high school size lunch and not do a elementary pickup, it's twice a week, and it's a half an hour window. There's a window in the morning. It's very difficult for a lot of families to hit that. So the afternoon window is a lot of times our only option. It's just a tight window. So I just would really encourage us to look at that.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Bryant?
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrave?
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe?
Yes.
Mr. McNally?
Yes.
Ms. Weigel?
Yes.
Mrs. Barker?
Yes.
Mr. Mannheim?
Yes, motion passes. All right, that takes us to our next item.
And Mr. President and board members, I need to notify you that I'm recusing myself from item 5B due to professional obligation.
Thank you. Okay. Item B, do I have a motion to approve the designation of depositories?
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Weibel and Mr. McNally. Any conversation? All right.
And Mrs. Beardsley, so you're abstaining.
I'm recused.
Yes. Mrs. McCabe?
Yes.
Mr. McNally?
Yes.
Ms. Weibel?
Yes.
Mrs. Barker?
Yes.
Mr. Bryant?
Yes.
Mr. Mannheim?
Yes. Motion passes. All right. Item C, do I have a motion to approve policy 460, purchases and contracts?
So moved.
Mr. McNally?
Second.
Mrs. Weibel? Any conversation or comment pertaining to policy 460?
The only comment that I wanted to make was more just to refresh from a control standpoint that we had talked about with Dr. Chapman, that if this particular policy would pass, the administration would provide a different level of reporting for perhaps the next 90 days or so that we can, as a board, just monitor how this policy is being utilized and gain that experience.
Thank you, Mrs. Fairgrave. I was going to actually also ask Dr. Chapman to please clarify also what the process would be should we have a new contract or new vendor, someone that is under that 25,000 limit but is brand new to the board, and what that process might look like. Sorry to put you on the spot.
Yes, good question. In general, as we have done in the past before, even we've had items that have come in under $10,000, we'll always be going out and getting competitive quotes with at least 3 vendors. And then if there's any kind of an instructional or operational impact, you're going to hear about that as well. Typically, you'll hear about that through learning and teaching, regardless of the financial impact.
Thank you so much. And this is something we did talk about at the committee, but I just want to make sure we readdress it here at the board level. Thank you, Dr. Chapman, for coming up.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions or comments? We can take a vote.
Mrs. McCabe?
Yes.
Mr. McNally?
Yes.
Ms. Weibel?
Yes.
Mrs. Barker?
Yes.
Mr. Bryant?
Yes.
Mrs. Beardsley?
Yes.
Mr. Mannheim?
Yes. Motion passes. All right, that takes us to item D. Do I have a motion to approve the resolution authorizing the county transfer to the capital projects fund?
So moved.
Second, Ellie, and then Mr. Bryant. Any comments or discussion pertaining to item D? Okay.
Mr. McNally?
Yes.
Ms. Weibel?
Yes.
Mrs. Barker?
Yes.
Mr. Bryant?
Yes.
Mrs. Beardsley?
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe?
Yes.
Mr. Mannheim?
Yes, motion passes. All right, takes us to item E. Do I have a motion to approve the Athletic Boosters Club Turf Field annual payment deferral?
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Fairgrave, Ms. Weibel? Any questions or comments pertaining to this? We discussed that business services, and it's just basically adding a year on to the contract.
I just want to reiterate to the board again, they came to us because of obviously the pandemic situation has made it difficult for them to get their fees. And I think it's a reasonable request, so.
All right,
Ms. Weibel?
Yes.
Mrs. Barker?
Yes.
Mr. Bryant?
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrave?
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe?
Yes.
Mr. McNally?
Yes.
Mr. Mannheim?
yes, motion passes. All right, that takes us to our last action item, which is item F. Do I have a motion to approve the high school fees?
So moved.
Mr. McNally?
Second.
Mrs. Fairgrave? Any comments into this? Okay.
Mrs. Mrs. Barker,
Yes.
Mr. Bryant,
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrave,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Ms. Weigel,
Yes.
Mr. Mannheim.
Yes, motion passes. All right, let's take us to our consent agenda. Is there anything anyone would like to pull?
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to pull 6A7, please, the special board meeting minutes.
Good for all the minutes or just a specific one? Just a specific one? Okay. All right, anything else, anyone like, anything else? Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda minus item A7?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Bryant and Mr. McNally? Any comments or questions? Okay.
Sorry about that. Mr. Bryant,
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrave,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Ms. Weigel,
Yes.
Mr. Mannheim. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. I'm sorry about that. Mrs. Barker,
Yes.
Mr. Mannheim.
Yes. All right. Motion passes. All right, that takes us to, do I have a motion to approve consent agenda item A minutes 7, special board meeting September 24th, 2020?
So moved.
Mr. Bryant
Second.
and Mr. McNally.
If I may just explain to my colleagues as to why I pulled this. I do not feel that the synopsis that we gave on the special board meeting minutes, this is not something I typically do, was detailed enough for a meeting that I thought was important to share with the public. I know we're televised, webcam, whatever we are. I don't, what is this called? Streamed, thank you. And technically savvy now, but I still think it's important to put specifics into writing. We had a very lengthy discussion, and thank you, Mrs. McCabe and Mrs. Barker, for bringing it up tonight, to extend that conversation about the facility utilization plan in particular. I think the specifics we're gonna talk about is really important for this board to set the tone and to move forward on what we wanna try to help this community achieve through the district's goals in the next 5 or 10 years with this plan. It's a really important piece, and I think the more transparent we can be about it, I think the better off the community will be. And I just feel like the minutes were not specific enough, and I feel pretty strongly about it. So I don't want to approve the minutes, so that's just where I'm coming from.
All right. Any other comments pertaining to that item? Okay. We'll get rolling.
Mrs. Fairgrave,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Ms. Weigel,
No.
Mrs. Barker,
No.
Mr. Bryant,
Yes.
Mr. Mannheim.
Yes. All right, motion passed. All right.
Thank you for that.
Good, thank you. That concludes consent. We'll take us to our board information items. Our usual, our FOIA request, financial reports, the COVID financial update, the PTAB update, the D03 financial report, near final, and then the district enrollment. That concludes for information. That takes us to new business. Anybody have any new business?
I do. I would like to, how do I raise the high school reopening plan up, and I am interested in when that discussion will be continued around what we see as the next phase.
We had a preliminary meeting today, actually, to talk about what the next steps might be. I mean, clearly, we would like to be able to get everyone back in the building and just see how that goes, starting on Thursday. We're gonna need to redo a survey, and so right now, our timeline for the survey would be to survey families, I believe it's November the 9th, and ask for those to be returned by the 18th of November so that we can look at planning for the next step. We have seen an increase in the percentage of families that have asked for remote this time. Now we're up to 23% fully remote, with the latest information and 77% in person. So right now we're looking forward to implementing the process as we've outlined it so far, and then we'll be planning for the next phase over the next few weeks.
So just to reiterate, we went from 83% to 77 for in-person?
It was 87 to 77, yes.
Okay, I'll have to go back through my
I thought
notes.
it was 87.
I recall 87.
Okay. And what would we be surveying again?
We would be looking at second semester to see if anyone is making changes for second semester.
Okay.
There is an expectation that there might be a change in kind of what's happening with the virus over the next few weeks, in particular as the flu season begins. And so we'll be curious to see, number one, do we have any outbreaks at school? And then number two, are families having more reservations about sending students to school based on what's happening in the community, which is impossible to predict at this point.
I just would ask and emphasize, I think it's very important, just because of time that's in front of us, that we're looking at multiple plans and perhaps the ideal scenario within this pandemic for second semester, and then contingency plans, to your point, if there's an outbreak or if something doesn't go well in the St. Charles or the Kane County community, how do we address that?
So we're looking at every viable option under our current constraints, which includes multiple formats of instructional opportunities.
So when should we expect the next update?
I would say that we should have something at the November Learning and Teaching meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Pearson, can I just rewind for a minute and just ask you a clarifying question about the results of the survey? I know that we had a staff survey as well as this last survey out to parents. Will we see the a summative result presentation on those at all?
Yeah, so that information is being compiled for the board, and we'll be sharing that with you. But that is not the same survey. There's two different surveys that happened at about the same time. One was making a selection about the instructional model. The other was just the regular survey that we had planned to do a few months into the school year about people's experience with remote learning, what kinds of instructional tools are teachers using, whether or not they felt like those were successful, what suggestions did they have. So that is a different survey. Dr. Penman and I talked about that today as well, and she's putting a summary together.
Okay, so the 77% was just the one question survey we did? I think it was only one question, right? That went out? Okay, thank you. And so we'll see that probably in November or December?
Actually, I hope to send it out before that.
Oh, okay, perfect, thank you. Go ahead.
I would also like to bring up, would like to know when we plan to bring back the topics of the elementary plan and the middle school plan. The middle school plan right now is asynchronous, 3 or 2 days a week. And given what we're going to try at the high school level, after a time when we see success, I'd like to reopen the middle school to look at more synchronous time for the middle school students. And then elementary right now is they're going home at 1:40. So is there potential where down the road we may add on time?
So we have looked at some scenarios for elementary and middle, and I think it would be appropriate to have that conversation about all 3 levels at the November LNT meeting. In case the board wants to make changes for the second semester, that would give us the time to implement that.
Thank you.
I do have another order of new business if we're ready to move on, but I'll wait to see if anyone else has comments. Okay. Ms. McCabe mentioned earlier the concept of town halls in relation to the facility utilization plan. I wanted to just bring it up as a general concept. We have had a lot of feedback from the community about access to the board members in a 2-way communication venue or medium. It is very difficult in the board meeting, obviously, because we don't respond to citizen comments, though we appreciate everyone's comments, and we do hear them. We haven't done the coffees, obviously, because of the pandemic, so I want to just bring up to the board the opportunity or concept of a town hall meeting, as Mrs. McCabe said, that we might be doing in January for the CAC, or the facility utilization, pardon me. And the concept of getting questions ahead of time, responding to them. Obviously, we would probably still have our 50-person limit, even if we did it a couple months out. So I just didn't know what the board thought about a concept like that, to try to open up some communication lines with the community. We do have a lot going on, obviously with the school, different school plans, and the facility utilization is gonna be a hot topic for the next 6 to 8 months, so I don't know what the board is thinking, but I wanted to bring it up to the president and see if we wanted to put it on a subcommittee for a topic, or if it had no feet or legs, then we don't have to talk about it, so.
Just come back to me.
Don't everyone talk at once.
Right. Well, I guess in the past, right, we never really took it to subcommittee or anything. I think it was just something we tried to do. So I guess the board members want to think about it maybe, and if you have thoughts about it tonight.
My thoughts, certainly I am open and very supportive of doing something like that in an appropriate medium. The only thing that I think is critical is that we have takeaways from those meetings that we actually have discussion about, make some decisions on, and potentially action. So that would be my ask.
To quote board members, we don't want to meet just to meet. That we want actual purpose to come from it. I'm trying to lighten the mood here for a minute. I agree with you that there's a purpose and tasks coming out of it. I don't know if we want to try the format out with the facility utilization concept as the topic. Obviously, hearing feedback from the community would certainly be purposeful.
My wondering is that, having talked to the CAC exec team, I believe we're going to get some great suggestions about how we're going to communicate the work that's going on. I can't really land on a town hall for just to have a town hall right at this moment, only because I'm with Mrs. Fairgrave, I would like to have a purpose to it. And I think the facilities is going to be huge. At least I hope that it is seen by the community as a opportunity to look into the future and finding ways for them to also be part of that conversation. And I believe that our representative group will have lots of offerings of how to communicate. So I don't really want, for me as the co-chair of CAC, I wouldn't want to land on just one kind of approach, and would like to let the CAC kind of build out what they're looking at. I also am not afraid of town halls or communicating in a variety of ways. I didn't get to participate with the coffee. The pandemic happened the month that I think we were supposed to do coffee. But I'd like to see how CAC works through and what their thinking is before I land on something.
The reason why I brought it up is I think the amount of communication that's still being generated from our community about the different venues of learning, in person, remote, hybrid, to me warrants some kind of medium. I don't know what that is, so I kind of chose town hall, and it was suggested a town hall might be a good idea. I don't know how to, in a pandemic, communicate two-way with the community about their feelings on how learning is going. And the facilities is certainly gonna be a hot topic coming up too. So I just feel that, as someone who has communications background, we need to figure out a way to communicate more. So I don't know what the solution is, but that's where I feel like this board needs to move towards.
Dr. Pearson? Oh, I'm sorry.
Just to add further clarification from my earlier comment, I too agree. I think it's very important to find out what that mode is or multiple modes is to communicate with our stakeholders, with the community. My comment about the action was really more so from the community's standpoint. I think it's important that when they spend their time and come and give feedback, that it is actioned upon, whether that is we actually are able to implement something forward with what their suggestions or feedback is, or we explain why it cannot happen that way. So that was really where I was coming from that standpoint. I didn't want us to be in a mode where we're taking a lot of information in.
And it just sits, yeah, I
And
get it.
that's kind of where I wanted to jump in. That was the thoughts that have been kind of bounced around my head since this was brought up. I don't want to, I have said repeatedly, I don't like to have meetings for the sake of meetings. I do want to have meetings for the sake of discussing and informing the public. But I don't want, what I don't want to have is to have a meeting and give the impression that we are going to be able to take action on something, and we've got a group of people who've said, well, they listened to us, and then all of a sudden, it's not happening the way they thought. So I think what we have to do is know what the topics are going to be before we decide what format we're going to use. And once we've decided what the topic is and what the format is, I think we can have a more firm discussion about the kind of the details of it. But I am 100% for letting the public know as much as possible, as quickly as possible, and what the plans are. Because a lot of times the feedback that comes back is something that can be helpful to us.
I think, Mr. McNally, you're on point with that. Some of the other communities are doing this submit your questions ahead of time concept, and that is helping. Sometimes the answer from the boards, as we all know, being on the board, is we can't make that happen, but here's why. And I think with the pandemic, now that we're a little bit, I don't want to say slowed down, but finding a pattern again, we're able to get back to some normalcy of trying to communicate on a regular basis again, instead of in a crisis mode, even though we are still in a crisis. And I think with that, trying to find some normalcy back to that communication of when we were able to explain, oh, here's why we can't do X, Y, or Z. And it's difficult in this current culture to have that communication two-way medium. And so I just think we don't have to have the answer tonight. That's why I said I don't know if we want to talk about it next meeting or talk about it at one of the committee meetings. I just wanted to stimulate everyone's minds about maybe solution-based. And this goes out to staff too. How can we fix this? Or what can we do to reach out in the future as we have these major topics we're going to talk about? Sorry, Ms. McCabe, you relied on.
Well, Dr. Pearson, we're having a communication audit. Is there a way that this type of communication could be part of the process in their, and how they look at things and any recommendations that they give?
I certainly think that community engagement piece would be a portion that we would want to ask them to look at. So we can make sure that they have that on their list. I think it is included as part of what they're hoping to address. And then also hopefully when they have their conversations with each one of the board members, we'll be able to share that question about two-way communication with the board and figuring out the best formats for that. And honestly, that's a pretty short timeline, that they're coming in December to give that report. So perhaps that's the time for you to talk about, what their recommendations are, but then also maybe what some of your ideas are in relation to moving forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McCabe, that's a great line. Thank you, Dr. Pearson.
Again, my only comment on this is I don't want this to be a frustrating time waster for anyone. And so I don't want us to do this. I don't want to do something until we know what we're doing. So, and that doesn't mean I want to put it off. It means I would like to have the discussion to figure it out and know what those topics are going to be. Because frankly, I'd like to be prepared to discuss them as well.
Okay, all right, well then I think, Dr. Pearson's comment about waiting to see what happens with the audit might be a good time for us to revisit it then. And then we can maybe be more focused on things, because I think things are gonna kind of keep changing now that we're pushing to get high school kids back in. And then we might have a discussion in November about second semester too. So I think maybe that's a good time for us to evaluate that and look forward to maybe having some conversations with the public. Okay. All right, that takes us to our items for discussion. We have 2 items tonight. First, we'll start off with closing learning gaps in K-8 math and reading. I will turn it over to Dr. Pearson.
So we are excited tonight to have Dr. Herman and Mrs. Phillips and Mrs. King from the Learning and Teaching Department. They're going to come and walk us through a presentation with information related to your board goal on pre-K through 8 instructional gaps and kind of what some of the work is that's going on in our schools with our teachers related to ensuring that students are, we're addressing the needs that are in front of us with students based on where they are in their learning. So, Dr. Herman.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? It's done. It's done. Is that better?
Yes.
That's better. Thank you. It's very nice to be joining you this evening, and we are very excited to be sharing some very thorough data on how our students started off the school year in both reading and math. I am joined by 2 colleagues who've been taking on quite a leadership role in this initiative, and so I'd like them to introduce themselves, and I'll dive right into the presentation.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Phillips. I am the Director of Professional Learning and support the MTSS work across the district. So the preschool to grade 8 gap goal set by the board is to increase by half the number of K-8 students ready to learn grade level standards-based curriculum. Tonight we will address the 3 action steps by determining the amount of students who are ready to learn grade level standards, identify the performance gaps, and share the instructional supports in place to reduce the number of students with those performance gaps. To answer the first question, how many students are ready to learn grade level standards, we used iReady's beginning of the year view to assess students' proficiencies with the previous grade level standards. This view allows us to look backwards and determine if students are entering their current grade level with mastery of the previous year's standards.
So using the iReady Fall Diagnostic Assessment, 80% of students in grades 1 through 8 demonstrate grade level readiness in mathematics. That means when students are assessed on the prior year's standards, 80% are considered proficient and ready to learn mathematics for their current grade level. By grade level, the range of students demonstrating math readiness compared to grade level standards is 74% to 92%. That is a range of 18. We want all students to achieve understanding of grade level standards. The goal is 100%. Using the multi-tiered system of support framework, our student goal is to have 80% achieving grade level standards without additional interventions. We expect 20% of students to need more support to achieve grade level content standards. Most grade levels are above or very close to the 80% target in math. In middle school, 7th and 8th grade may need more support to reach that target for Tier 1 instruction. To set our district performance in a larger national context, we can see that our district continues to perform strongly in comparison to a representative norm group. We are 4% greater than the historic national norm. Measuring learning gaps in this unique school year, we can also compare our performance to the national tested population this fall, which represents all diagnostics taken across the nation in September. This includes data from approximately 1.5 million assessments. This is further evidence that our district has relatively small learning losses compared to the large national samples. This is really a celebration of our students and teachers and parents' work this past spring. We believe all students are capable of achieving grade level proficiency in mathematics. As we consider equity and access issues related to readiness and performance gaps, we ask the question, do specific subgroups, sorry, it helps if I have my glasses on, do specific demographic groups of students have differences in readiness to learn? We can see from the graph that there are no gender differences in math readiness. Our district data mirrors achievement research that typically shows performance gaps. This tool allows us to see which students might not be ready and provide more targeted and responsive interventions. Our goal is to close this gap. Did the school closures and remote learning in the spring significantly impact particular student subgroups? To answer this question, we compared fall 2019 diagnostic assessment data from performance series to fall 2020 iReady diagnostic assessment data by subgroup. Looking at this graph, we want to focus on the red columns that might show a decrease compared to the blue columns, which represent last year's P-Series fall data. We can see that only 3 subgroups of students showed slight decreases: Hispanic students, multiracial students, and economically disadvantaged students. English language learners and students with IEPs have shown increased readiness.
In addition to looking at the data by the percent of students on grade level, we can use national percentile data as another data point to assess readiness. Within our MTSS structures, we utilize national percentile ranking to identify students in need of tiered intervention opportunities in addition to core instruction. This table provides us with the percent of students in the area of mathematics identified as needing Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions based on their fall diagnostic screening data over the past 3 years. This data set represents students in grades 3 to 8. For this current year, 2020-21, 78% of our students are identified as responding to Tier 1 core instruction, 15% are in need of Tier 2 targeted interventions, and 7% of students require intensive intervention. In interpreting this data, we are consistently identifying between 17 to 22% of our student population as needing additional instruction and intervention layered upon Tier 1. This closely aligns with iReady's data stating 80% of our students are ready to learn grade level standards in the area of mathematics.
And then we can look at some of these same statistics in reading. Using the iReady Fall Diagnostic Assessment, 76% of students in grades 1 through 8 demonstrate grade level readiness in reading. By grade level, the range of students demonstrating reading readiness compared to grade level standards is 63% to 95%, a range of 32. There's greater variability in the reading data compared to the math grade level data. We want all students to achieve understanding of grade level standards. Again, the goal is 100% of students being ready for grade level content. Using our multi-tiered system of support framework, our district target is 80% of students achieving grade level standards using evidence-based practices. Some grade levels are above or very close to the 80% target. First grade, second grade, and fourth grade are above the 80% target line. Third grade and fifth grade through 8th grade are below the 80% target line. Again, like math, we can set our district performance in a larger national context. You can see that our district continues to perform strongly in comparison to the representative normed group. We are 6% above the national historic norms in District 303. We can also compare our performance to the national tested population, again representing over 1.5 million diagnostics taken in the nation in September. We are 7% above the national population tested in September. Again, evidence that our district has experienced relatively small learning losses compared to large national samples. We can evaluate readiness by comparing subgroups across the district. Male students showed a 6% decrease in reading readiness. Again, like the math data, our demographic groups show performance gaps similar to the research on national achievement gaps. Did the school closures and remote learning in the spring significantly impact particular student subgroups? We were able to use our fall 2019 diagnostic assessment data from performance series to compare to our iReady fall 2020 data by subgroup. In reading readiness, most subgroups had slight decreases, except for English language learners and students with IEPs. These two subgroups had increased readiness.
In addition to looking at the data by the percent of students on grade level, we can use national percentile data as another data point to assess readiness. Within our MTSS structures, we utilize national percentile ranking to identify students in need of tiered intervention opportunities. This table provides us with the percent of students in the area of reading identified as needing tier 2 and 3 interventions based on their fall diagnostic screening data over the past 3 years. This data set represents students in grades 3 to 8. For this current year, 2020-21, 78% of our students are identified as responding to tier 1 core instruction, 15% of students are in need of tier 2 targeted intervention, and 7% of students require intensive intervention. In interpreting this data, we are consistently identifying between 18 to 22% of our student population as needing additional instruction and intervention layered on top of tier 1. This closely aligns with iReady's data stating that 76% of our students are ready to learn grade level standards in the area of reading.
So I know that's a lot of data to start off, so we're going to take a brief summary. So what we've shared so far, a highlight, is that on average, the learning loss due to the COVID school closures is relatively small. And we feel very good about that. We know that our community values education and that our teachers were providing quality instruction this last spring. And on average, D303 students are ready to learn grade level standards. But the data also showed that there are gaps between some of our subgroups, and that some of those gaps, we need to address them. Our MTSS team reviewed the same data report this afternoon, and they also echoed the concern and the dedication that they have to closing the achievement gaps. Our historical data, being able to use the iReady national norms, has been very helpful to us. So we were able to look at the historical data as well as other schools who tested this spring. So that's already showing the power that we have in iReady by letting us take that deep dive for our students, but then also the comparison to the national norms. And finally, another celebration actually is we rolled out iReady for the first time this fall. And we had a very, very high participation rate. We want to thank all of the teachers who assisted with this and who learned a new tool. All of the students, this is a challenging assessment, and they were very persistent. And again, the parents who also supported the rollout, we were able to get a lot of wonderful data. And I'm now going to turn it over because the second question you asked is, what are some of those specific gaps? We had grade level standards, now we're going to dig a little bit deeper.
Again, to echo Dr. Penman's comment, with this new tool, we really were able to, for the first time, to identify performance gaps specifically for you. Using guidance from the ISBE priority documents, we have identified area of greatest need in both math and reading. With the iReady diagnostic assessment, we have more detailed, specific information about what our students know and can do than ever before. To identify the math performance gaps by standard, we were able to investigate the domain of greatest need and identify the standard or standards that had fewer than a third of students demonstrating proficiency. All of the performance gaps in number and operations were fluency standards. For example, in grade 3, students were less likely to be able to add and subtract within 1,000 using regrouping strategies. In grades 4 and 5, fluency with fraction operations became a factor, as well as using whole numbers to solve multi-step problems. Working to strengthen these standards is important work, as these fluency goals are foundational areas for access to higher level algebraic reasoning. In middle school, we see similar patterns. Students need more help in becoming fluent with fraction operations and solving linear equations. In summary, the encouraging news is that we see little evidence of new performance gaps in math, but rather the need to focus instruction and assessment on foundational fluency standards that support algebraic thinking.
The reading domains assessed in iReady include phonological awareness, phonics, high-frequency words, vocabulary, literature, and informational text. In the area of reading, the performance gap by domains are identified as vocabulary in grade 1, phonics in grades 2 through 4, and informational text in grades 4 through 8. To identify the reading gaps by standard, we are able to dig into the domain of greatest need and identify the standard or standards that have fewer than a third of students master. In grades 1 through 3, the standards are focused on explicit understanding of phonics, phonemic awareness, and the use of context clues to derive meaning from words. Beginning in 2nd grade, or beginning in 4th grade, the standards focus more on explicitly deriving meaning from informational text and passages to describe commonalities and differences, as well as the structure of text. As student moves towards middle school, nonfiction passages become more complex, and the standards focus more on multiple points of view, central themes, and inferring meaning from informational text. So next, we will address the 3rd action step regarding instructional supports to address the identified performance gaps. All grade levels, K-8, continue to grow in their capacity as a PLC to use data to inform their instruction and differentiate to meet the needs of individual and groups of students. Through these conversations, PLCs have created action steps to address these needs, and they are captured in their building school improvement plans. At the elementary level, personalized learning time is embedded into the school day to provide students with targeted interventions and personalized learning opportunities through the use of iReady's personalized learning pathway. At the middle school level, their intervention course syllabi were revised to address specific skill gaps, identify common instructional resources, utilize the iReady personalized learning pathway, and progress monitor students bi-weekly to be responsive to student learning.
So that's a lot of data on our elementary and middle school math and reading. And we know that some of the goals that you set earlier in the summer go beyond that. So what's coming to you next? Next Monday at the October Learning and Teaching Board presentation will be the analogous goal you set for high school in terms of measuring the prerequisite skill gaps that might exist. We also will have some baseline data to share with you on the social emotional learning update. And then next, at the November Learning and Teaching presentation, will be a repeat and actually improvement on what you received last year, the Student Achievement Report. We got such positive feedback from you that we are going to be incorporating the iReady and some of these new measures into that comprehensive view of the district. So that will be coming to you in November. And we thank you for your attention, and all 3 of us are ready to answer any questions you might have.
I have, the middle school data gets lost a little bit in what was reported, and I'm wondering if you are able to pull out, especially in comparison to the national standards, what the national standards are for 6 through 8, and then how we compare.
Do you mean standards as in the identified ones down to the nitty-gritty, or do you mean in the more global sense?
Like, for example, the math readiness district and national comparison. So that's a lot of grades in that
Got it. So this particular slide,
Your green, yellow, red one.
got it, yep.
There.
Yes. You would appreciate having that broken down by smaller grade spans?
Just the middle, the
Just the middle
segment, the
school.
middle school?
Yes.
Because if you look at them by grade, although it's not as distinct for math, it certainly is on the reading side, as you identified.
Yes.
But I would be interested to see how we compared on the national stage, just the middle school populations.
Absolutely, we can have that pulled and ready for you by next Monday.
Thank
night.
you.
Sticking on that topic, something that stood out to me and this can possibly be why you see a difference there, Mrs. Fairbury. The middle school kids were tested at home, and I think, to me, that's concerning that they don't have a stable environment like the elementary students had. So I would like to see future tests for the middle school kids to happen in the buildings. I know that there was an issue with losing instructional time, but to me, getting the appropriate data in the school setting, I think is something that we need to do.
I'm going to dovetail on that just a bit. The concern I have with students taking tests at home is the same concern I have as a teacher with students taking tests at home. I don't know what they have or who they have helping them. And so I know that there can be probably some skewing of data, and it would not be confined obviously to any one district, so I don't know that there's any way to normalize that, but that's a concern that I have, just with all at-home testing, is how we can prevent that kind of skewing of data. The other thing that I had, not as long as I've got the floor here for a moment, the other thing that I'd like to see is we've kind of in the past sometimes done a comparison of like districts, and so I'd kind of like to see that as well. And they don't have to all be demographically identical to ours, but we had kind of a group of 6 or 7 districts we used to kind of compare ourselves to and see where we sat in that herd. Sometimes we're on the top, sometimes we're in the middle.
We will be able to do that more easily at the November session where we have a broader scope of data, because this is just local iReady data, and so many districts are in disarray in terms of who they're testing and how they're testing. We really couldn't get comparison groups for this report, but we will continue to try and do that for the future reports.
Absolutely. I didn't expect that it was necessary. This is, I know, early, and I appreciate it coming as quickly as it could. Thank you for that.
I also wanted to comment because we did have similar questions on the learning and teaching team. And when we met with our iReady coaches who help us make sense of this data the first time we're going through it, they did have a comparison group for students across the nation who took it in school. And what's the other word for that, Tina?
And somewhere else.
And somewhere else is what it's called. At school or somewhere else. We did see a difference more so in the younger grades, K1, 2, 3, but by 4th grade, the difference between students who took it at school and took it at home was almost negligible. So I will make sure that we share that slide with you so that you can have some of those same wonderings maybe answered by that slide. But we will again bring that when we bring the middle school data. We'll also bring some of the at-home versus in-school testing. And I think you'll see that although there is evidence that some students may have received additional support, again, sometimes parents, and with all good intention, think that reading the question aloud is not helping, but we know it is helping. Again, the data showed that by 4th and 5th grade, it was much more negligible, the difference.
I think one of my concerns is going the other way, where many of our middle schoolers are at home working on their own. They don't have the support of a parent or even better, a teacher to look over them.
And make sure they're staying focused on the assessment.
Correct. And also the way we used iReady last spring is not the way we're using it this year. So, these students had maybe 15, 20 days, I don't know, probably 10 days before they took this assessment, and they were using iReady much differently in the spring than they were in the fall. And then we asked them to take this assessment that is giving us all this data. So to do it at home in that environment with possibly not having someone there to and I don't mean help them with reading questions, but a 6th grader taking this assessment on their own is very difficult.
Yes. Thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you so much for compiling all the data. It's really enlightening to see that on paper. I think my question is, where will we see in the student achievement report the strategies to help address the gaps that we're seeing in some of the data that we're getting for this year? We're seeing the supplemental data. We got the supplemental piece that showed some of the data early for this year. So in learning what we saw in the spring, applying that to strategies to kind of help the outcomes we're seeing already for this fall, will we see that in that report in November, or when will we see that information?
In terms of strategies for our MTSS groups, like what interventions are we using for students who are showing these gaps?
Right.
We can go deeper into some of the interventions that we've been using, both Tier 1 at the classroom level, as well as Tier 2 and Tier 3. We can definitely expand on that during our November report.
I think, and then take it a step further and just help us understand what the outcomes of those strategies are. So this is what we're utilizing, this is what's working, here's how we're bringing this particular group number up. Does that make sense?
It reminds me of actually, I think it was Tina King who did the voiceover on that example from when we talked about iReady and the student who had very specific deficits in math, the kind of intervention tools we used with iReady and the growth that she showed. We can definitely bring back other examples of how we're trying to do that.
Okay. In the sense of it being enlightening, I think it's interesting how we measure to national norms. I certainly would be curious on what the board's interpretation is as to what we would see as a goal, I mean, maybe for next year, and what we think is, now that we have the beginning base of the data, as where we would like to be against national norms for next year or years that follow. And then certainly using this data, I know this is just the beginning, so it's nice to just have a baseline. I'm just projecting out. To look at the math and ELA readiness subgroup data to obviously see some of that equity. With our subgroups, there's such an inequity as to where we're at in performance. So obviously, those are goals I know you guys have, and those are goals that the board has as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing some of that change. And then I just have one clarifying question, and then I will turn my mic off. The SEL goal update for October, that's a K through 12, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. It didn't say, I just assumed, it didn't clarify, so I'm assuming it's the whole shebang.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, but thank you so much for the data.
Okay, so I have a question about the norming on iReady. Typically, benchmarking assessments like this that are given fall, winter, and spring have different norms for fall, winter, and spring. So my question is that because you gave the students, let's say we're in 7th grade, so they took the 6th grade assessment, is that correct?
No, it's not. Tina, I think you're definitely an expert in explaining.
Yes.
Because we kind of view the data in 2 different ways. And so I'm going to let Tina talk about the 2 different ways. Even though it's one score, iReady has 2 ways of helping us think about the data in terms of looking back as how much of last year's standards were attained versus looking forward, how ready are they for this year's upcoming standards.
So the iReady diagnostic assessment is a computer adaptive assessment. So the 7th graders took the 7th grade assessment, but remember that it measures individual students' propensity to learn and what they've learned from the previous year. So the The computer adapted test goes down to see what they already know, and then also goes up depending on the student responses. So it is different depending on the student that takes the test. But we have a scale score that is their current grade level scale score, and we can view the results in standard view, which is compared to the current grade level standards. And we can also look back, which is the readiness measure, a beginning of the year view that shows, did students learn the grade level content from the previous year? And so the readiness data that we presented tonight is from that readiness, or that beginning of the year view.
I wanted to make sure that was very clear. The other question I do have, thank you very much, Ms. King, is that we did not receive this presentation electronically, correct?
It's in your packet now, it was posted today.
Okay, it's in
And
there.
then it's gonna be posted publicly too.
Okay, thank you. And then, so I noticed we have this additional piece with looking at the buildings and their students demonstrating competencies. Will there be a part of a plan that's discussed in our strategies that are discussed in November about particular buildings that may need more support at certain grade levels in certain areas? My concern is all of our coaches or most of the coaches were then put into the classroom. How will they receive that support?
We will incorporate those strategies into our November presentation. We definitely, are feeling the gap of not having those reading experts and those math experts. But we have very strong MTSS teams at each site. And we talk about the data team meetings. So all of the schools have had their data meetings already where they use this iReady data at the site level and at the grade level teams. And so then they're using that data to set individual, so if a fourth grade team at Pearson Creek saw something about informational text that was consistent, they then as a grade level team talked about which students are in the group that need more interventions, what are we going to be using. So we are trying to use the talent and the time we have available now to still do the intervention work that needs to be done, and that is that personalized learning time. But we definitely look forward to the time where we will have our interventionists back doing supplemental instruction in addition to our classroom teachers.
Thank you.
My turn. Overall, it looks better than I think, at least I was expecting. I think that speaks highly for our teachers, especially in March and April and May when it was so crazy. Congratulations to all the hard work that they did. I have a couple of questions and a concern. I'm kind of concerned about third grade in reading, ELA. And I'm wondering, and everybody has asked it, so it's clearly on everybody's mind, what supports do we need to be considering? If this was what at the end of last year that they should, and we have groups of kids who are not near that 80%, that worries me as we go along. I'm also concerned about middle school. If we had 5 hours, I'd love to sit down and go, why math so well, versus ELA, but that's getting in the weeds. I guess the big question I have, besides the supports that teachers need, and I think the board should be concerned about how to be sure that they're getting the support for instructional change so students will learn, is the targeted subgroups. This board knows that I was not happy with the way we selected our goals. And so the reason was we didn't have the data in front of us. And if I was going to make a goal now, I'd be much more specific about subgroups. Because I am concerned that there is a huge gap. I'm impressed that ELA, or that our EL kids and our IEP kids improved when everybody else didn't, but we still have huge gaps.
You'll be glad to know that we did set improvement targets for each of our subgroups. So we anticipated the board wanting to have a more finite target for each of our subgroups, and so we can share that next Monday night as
Okay.
well. We are just reporting now on all the things you asked of us. We anticipated that, and we will present what each of those, what does it look like for our Hispanic students to grow by more than half? What is that target area? What are we going to do for those students?
Okay, because I think the reason I would be concerned about looking at national is because it aggregates everybody. And that was always an issue when we did IGAP, if anybody remembers IGAP. And the one piece of No Child Left Behind that was good was we started looking at subgroups instead of assuming. So for me, it's important that we're doing for all kids and not just aggregating everybody. I think that there's work to be done, obviously, and I think we have the data that can give information, and I know you're all digging deeper, so I appreciate that. But I would like to have a goal that says to our community and to our teachers that all kids matter, and put a little bit of accountability on the board to be sure that we are supporting the needs of kids in the classroom as well. So thank you for your work on this.
Thank you.
Ms. McCabe, that was very well said, thank you. Seriously. I mean, that's what I said about it being enlightening. It would have been nice to have that when we set goals. But we can move forward with it and set them now using that. But I don't want to repeat, we've made a promise not to repeat what other people say, but I did want to highlight that. I think that was eloquently put, so thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right, thank you. That concludes our item A for discussion. That takes us to our last item for discussion tonight, which is the ISAB resolutions and the III Delegate Assembly. We included a hard copy as well as a virtual copy in your board packet. So if people want to take a look at those, we're not going to discuss them or dig into them tonight. We just wanted to get them in front of everybody so that we could have a discussion at the November board meeting. So it's not quite as heavy as they were last year, but if people want to take a look at them, and either we can talk about how we want to handle them, if we want to just vote on them as a whole, or if we want to pull some. If people have a feeling one way or another, and some we just kind of like we do consent agenda, where we pull an item. We can kind of vote on them as a whole, and then maybe pull some if people want to send those to me ahead of time, maybe. You might feel like, feel comfortable supporting it. And that way maybe we can kind of handle that and streamline that. And that's why I can work through that for November board meeting.
Yeah, that sounds good. I did talk to President Mannheim about them ahead of time. I've looked through them. They don't seem to be nearly as contentious as they've been in the past. Personally, I'm not sure that we would really but really have any major disagreements with what the recommendations are, but certainly each individual could potentially. But in the past, I mean, we've had major issues with some of them. Nothing stood out, so Mr. Mannheim and I went and did talk about that. And the other thing that we would need to do is talk about the delegate for the 14th. So this year, because obviously the pandemic, they have changed III, as you know, and you've gotten communication from administration that III itself is a virtual conference one day this year instead of 3 on the 20th. So, please sign up for that if you haven't done so. On the 14th, however, is the assembly where we do choose a delegate to obviously vote on the resolutions. Am I stealing your thunder? Sorry, I'm gonna be quiet. I'm just so used to doing the delegate stuff.
No, I mean, you kind of talked about it a little bit, as Ms. Weibel mentioned, they are doing it a little differently this year since it's virtual. I guess the first order of business is anyone that's interested in going, to let someone know in administration so we can get the registration paid for. And then we'll approve that at our November board meeting, as we normally do. And then, as Ms. Weibel mentioned, they are breaking it into 2 weekends. So the first is the 14th, so that brings us to our, do we have a delegate? Maybe we would like to jump up right now.
I said that I would do it last year, again this year, but I do want to, before we even get there, when are we when is the board meeting in November?
The 9th.
Okay. That's already past the point where there's other webinars that the delegate has to be on to ask questions or to bring any information or anything like that. If we're not even discussing them at that point, I'm concerned about that. So, you know, that's something just to think about. I don't know if anybody attended the webinar on the 28th, September 28th, about the delegate assembly, but there's a lot of information in there about it. So that's, I think, something that maybe we may need to, I don't know how people feel about having, and no meetings just to meet, but to discuss these so that the person can be prepared, whoever that might be, for these webinars that take place on the 21st and the 5th, the 21st of October and the 5th of November. That are pre-webinars.
I'm sorry, just to clarify, the webinars are for the delegate or for all board members?
It's for the delegate. Once you are registered, you are automatically registered for October 21st, which is a Wednesday, and that starts at noon, and it's at least an hour. And then November 5th is a Thursday at 6 p.m. to further discuss submitted resolutions. And if anyone's ever done the delegate assembly, there's a lot of discussion, there's a lot of talk from the districts. And that's at least an hour as well. And then just so everybody knows, on Saturday, November the 14th, it can be 2+ hours, the assembly.
So just to clarify again.
This is only for the delegate.
So if you're our delegate, you would attend those? Because I'm happy to vote you in to be our delegate.
I would second that motion.
What you're saying is we don't all have to attend that if we're not going to the assembly?
That is only for the delegate, but I wanted everyone to be aware if they were like, maybe I'll try it, like if they wanted to try it out, that there's already a lot involved. And
Having been a delegate, I'd like to nominate somebody else.
Okay, I will do it.
Other than me, I
Is
don't
that
think
enough?
other than me.
I think it'd be great, Mrs. Barker, if you would represent us.
Okay, well, we got that solved then.
Should we take a vote on that?
I think it was unanimous.
I would think it was pretty much by assent, but I don't know if we needed to have an official vote for delegates.
But thank you, Mrs. Barker. Okay, so then, were you saying that you feel like if there's any discussions pertaining to the resolutions?
That's the other pieces. If we don't discuss them till after the 2 webinars where discussion is taking place, then I don't know, does that bother anybody? Is it a concern for anybody?
We could add it to business services. It's
That was gonna
in
be my
between those
question.
two.
That's where I was leaning towards, just because we already are adding on to L&T.
I was gonna say something other than L&T because we've already got policy right before, right? And then we've got L&T,
Correct.
we've got a really full agenda, so I wouldn't wanna put it on there as much as, I know I volunteered us in the past, but.
So then maybe we.
I should check with Mrs. Fairgrave. Are you fine with that?
Yeah, that's
okay.
So
Before I
it's
volunteer.
still kind of the same, like, everyone kind of take a look at them, and maybe we can still, maybe Ms. Weibel and Ms. Berry, you can kind of talk about how you guys want to tackle them. doing business services, but maybe if people still have items that they'd like to talk about more, you can still send them to me and I can filter them back. That way maybe we can be more concise and,
Just a quick perusal of them, I just kind of looked through them, looked through them as we were talking here. A quick perusal of them, I don't think we're gonna have any terribly long discussion based on what I've seen here.
that's kind of the same thing. It doesn't seem as heavy as they have in the past.
I want to alert you that there is going to, that gun storage will be an issue. And I would like to have time to talk about that, and I do believe that we are being asked, that we will have citizens who will come and speak to that. So just, that is an issue, just so you're.
Yeah, I think certainly as soon as you see those three letters, that, I know that's but beyond that, the other ones are all, I don't really see anything that's gonna be a
I
terribly.
had 3 that I put red dots on. Just so we all know.
I'm so glad you're our delegate.
So, but I think we can probably get a lot of the information on those items ahead of time before that meeting.
Yeah, so then we can filter them through business services, and then that way we'll actually even, I won't even need to have any, unless someone else has something between now and the board meeting, we'll take action on that. Is everyone good with that?
I am.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm so sorry about starting that conversation.
All right, okay, I was gonna, let you just go, so. All right, anything else pertaining to the ISD? Okay. And that concludes our discussion items tonight. Are there any citizens' comments? All right, thank you. We do have one, so Ms. Barker, whenever you're ready.
Sure. The school code provides for a public comment period at each board meeting, subject to reasonable constraints. The practice of this board is to limit public comment to 3 minutes per speaker to a total of 15 minutes at the end of the meeting. Speakers addressing the board are expected to maintain a reasonable level of civility. Also, personnel matters are sensitive and confidential. Comments regarding individuals should be respectful. Insults and defamatory remarks have no place in this setting. The board will terminate public comment if speakers cannot adhere to these guidelines. Please identify yourself at the beginning of your remarks.
All right, thank you, Ms. Barker. I believe it's Mike.
Well, good evening. You guys had a very good session. I want to first thank you guys for, getting a process in place where we're going to get kids going back into high school. I think, a lot of people don't understand the challenges that you have to overcome to get our kids back into the school. And it is important. When you start looking at it and you start thinking about other areas around us, Geneva, for instance, where they're actually going to school more time than not, it's kind of a negative on our side where we're not getting that kind of pull through. And I think what you were talking about earlier on today was how do we go forward? And I think your plan was, we get to the 19th, we start getting kids in school, and then what's that next step? That next step has to come pretty sooner than later. And however we can make that happen, that'd be good. I have a daughter who has 6 honors classes, and she's a straight A student, and she's struggling in some classes because of the virtual process, right? I mentioned before last time I'm in technology, so I kind of understand how that gets done. But to watch my daughter struggle, it's kind of challenging for me, and for other parents too, I'm sure, just as well. So the sooner that we can sit back and say, look, you know what? We understand where we're at today, where the 19th could be. That next meeting may be in December, we were talking about, or November, we were talking about, what's that next step into getting at least maybe 4 days a week with 1 day off, or 1 day as remote. Maybe that kind of changes that environment and gets the kids back in there. If you look at the kids around us, even in this whole area, and a lot of areas outside of us, their kids are going to school. And, there may be some cases of COVID, but it's not as bad as we thought it was going to be because they're working through it. So the better we can get this going forward, I think the better everybody will be happy about this whole process, and we can make it to get our kids back in there. Once they're in there, we'll start knocking down some of these barriers that are out there, right? Like you heard, prom issues, homecoming, events, sports, everything. It's a total different environment for these kids. who are unfortunately suffering from it. And I know you guys are trying to do the best you can, I really do. And all I can ask you guys to do is continue to do what you're doing. We gotta move it just faster so we get these kids back into a regular schedule. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. We do not have closed session tonight, so do I have a motion to adjourn?
So,
Second.
Ms. Bible? Take roll.
Mrs. McCabe?
Yes?
Mr. McNally?
yes.
Ms. Weigel?
Yes.
Mrs. Barker?
Yes.
Mr. Bryan?
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrave?
Yes.
Mr. Manley?
Yes, we are adjourned at 9:00.